Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming today. We appreciate it was a choice between this session or lunch, so very thankful that you've chosen to attend today, because you do have two brilliant speakers that are going to be talking to you today. First up, we're going to hear from Olivia Deane from Ampere Analysis, and she'll be exploring how children's content creators can defy today's general business downturn when it comes to commissioning. And then we'll be hearing from Jelena Stojcik from Kids Industries, looking into how to harness the social power of fandom. And at the end, we will have some time available for any questions that you might have for our speakers. So I will now hand over to Olivia.
Hello, thanks again for coming. I'm Olivia, I'm from Ampere Analysis, and I'm excited to be talking about children's content in the sort of turbulent media market we're in at the moment. We've got media companies facing a range of both predicted and unforeseen challenges in terms of market saturation and industrial action, and this is going to have an impact on original commissioning over the next few years. So I've split my presentation into 4 key sections. The first section is an overview of the media market as a whole, looking at the state of commissioning, so I can give context for children's content, basically. The second section will show how the state of the market has impacted original commissioning as a whole, and then in particular children's titles. The third section is going to highlight key areas of growth as well as decline for children's commissioning. And the final section will outline where creators of children's content can concentrate their efforts to make the most of the current climate. So firstly, I'm going to look at the media market as a whole over the past 4 years so that we can better understand the current challenges being faced by original commissioners. So one of the biggest or most important changes that we've seen over the last 4 years is that streaming growth has stalled. So we're calling this the end of peak TV. The impact of the 2020 pandemic saw massive growth in the media market. We saw a huge uptick in subscribers. This chart shows the volume of subscription OTT customers every year since 2018 in blue, and I've combined it with the volume of net additions in pink. So you can see that although the streaming market is still growing, it has slowed considerably. And the main reason for this is oversaturation. So we know that for OTT services globally, there are 83 revenue-generating users per 100 households. So that's globally. So it's actually much higher in Western markets and much lower elsewhere. So with this level of oversaturation, we've seen net adds drop from 0.3 billion in 2020 to just 0.1 billion in 2023. And you can see as we go into 2024, it is recovering slightly, but it's still far below what it was in 2019 or 2020. So this might seem like it's a problem that's isolated to just big streaming companies who we already know are very difficult to secure commissioning deals with. But the drop in subscriber growth has had a knock-on effect on the media market as a whole. The main reason for this is because between 2018 and 2023, SVOD commissioners accounted for the majority of growth in the entire media market. So this chart is from Ampere's Markets Operators Service, and it shows that SVOD companies accounted for 142% of all media market revenue growth over that period. So ultimately, the massive boom in content that we saw was because of streamers, and unfortunately, it's coming to an end. However, with subscriber saturation more evident in some markets than others, there is a little bit of geographical nuance to this. So this chart shows the volume of net additions in 2022 and 2023 across different markets. So you can see that while net additions actually increased in markets like Central and Eastern Europe and the Middle East and North Africa, they plummeted in North America and in Asia Pacific. So you can see that different areas are going to be affected differently by this subscriber slowdown. Now, there have been a couple of different attempts to combat this subscriber slowdown. They've had varied and limited results. Probably the most significant one is Netflix's introduction of an ad-funded tier. So this chart shows the percentage change in Netflix subscribers between January 2020 and March 2024. So you can see that when they added the ad-funded tier, which is in June 2023, they had this massive uptick in subscribers, and probably the most significant one since sort of the early pandemic in 2020. Now, the ad-funded tier has also helped reduce churn for Netflix. So as we're seeing household budgets facing strain in the Western economy, the positive impact of an ad-funded tier has reduced churn for Netflix, and this looks set to continue as we go into 2024. Ad-supported tiers are good for SVOD services for 2 different reasons. The first one is that it diversifies revenue away from just subscription. And secondly, it increases their addressable market. So it means that people who previously couldn't afford the service might now sign up. And I can prove this. So my chart on the left in blue shows the proportion of Netflix subscribers who subscribe to the ad-funded tier. So that's as opposed to sort of the standard tier or the premium tier. You can see that as economic decline has increased, so has the proportion of people who've signed up to the service as part of the ad-funded tier. But this isn't just because they have a smaller household budget. It's also because, like I said, they've increased their addressable market. So my chart here in pink shows you that the ad-funded tier is more attractive to those from lower income brackets. So the chart shows that a higher proportion of ad tier subscribers in Q1 2024 came from a lower income bracket, so that's less than $40,000 per year than the average Netflix consumer. I also know that more ad-fund tier subscribers are first-time customers compared with the other tiers of Netflix. So it proves that they've helped diversify their subscriber base across people who maybe couldn't afford the service before. So this chart shows that more than half of all the subscribers to the ad-funded tier between July and December 2023 were first-time subscribers. That's compared to just a third of the premium users, which are in green. However, we saw that this new business model did have an immediate effect in terms of an uptick in subscribers, but its widespread and long-term results are a little bit more questionable. So this chart shows that Netflix's introduction of an ad-funded tier has actually had very little impact on its penetration and subscription in the Western European SVOD market. So I've got its market penetration here shown in blue, and then I've also got in pink the proportion of Western European customers who sign up to at least one SVOD service. And you can see that both lines have really plateaued, and it doesn't really look like they're going to see a lot of change in the near future. And to give this some context in terms of what we're talking about here today, I've also shown that family households are just as stubborn, if not more so. So this chart is Western European consumers who live with at least one child. As you can see, it showed no year-on-year growth between 2023 and 2024. And I think the main reason for this is oversaturation. I think the amount of children's content currently available to watch anywhere is just completely overwhelming. So Ampere's cross-platform analytics service showed that in April 2024, there were over 322,000 hours of children's content available to watch on streaming platforms or on scheduled TV. I'm sure you agree that's an enormous amount of TV. So I've sort of broken it down into bite-sized chunks. So 322,000 hours, not accounting for sleep, would take you 37 years to watch. So as you can understand, children don't really have 37 years to watch children's content. And what's more is that data doesn't account for children's content that's available to watch on free-to-watch platforms or social media. So the chart on the right highlights how average daily viewing time by platform type. And you can see that with the Western world facing a cost of living crisis, we can show that households with children watch less paid-for content in favour of watching more free social video and scheduled TV. This makes sense. If you're feeling the strain in terms of your household budget, you're not going to subscribe to a new paid-for service when your children are just as happy watching something for free. So we've established that SVOD services are facing a global slowdown, but what does this mean in terms of commissioning? So my next section is going to explore the impact this has had on the Western European commissioning market, and then in particular children's titles. The biggest takeaway from the decline in revenue is that spending has also stalled, which makes sense. So if we look at the amount being spent in the media landscape, here shown in blue, combined with the percentage growth shown in pink, we can see that the content market saw an increase in spending of 16% between 2021 and 2022. But by 2023, this has actually decreased by 1%. So this proves that as subscription slows for SVOD players, content spending on the whole has also been reduced. And understandably, this has had a direct impact on the volume of commissions being announced. So this chart shows the annual volume of commissions announced globally every year since 2020. So you can see that in 2021, the media market is enjoying rapid growth. The best way for people to stand out was to have high-value original content. But the more recent spending squeezes is seeing companies being more selective with their budgets, especially in more saturated markets. So as a result, the volume of commissions announced in 2023 dropped by 13% compared with the previous year. Now, this drop in commissions can't just be attributed to slowed growth in the streaming market. So we know that streaming companies do account for a large proportion of commissions, but other commissioners have also been struggling. So that's due to just slowed economy in the regions and also things like industrial action. So the strikes in America had a massive impact for commissioners in that market. And in 2023, they actually announced a quarter fewer commissions than they did in the previous year. In the same vein, you can see here that the story wasn't the same for all regions. So Western Europe actually fared the best out of all the different regions. As a result, Western Europe has been able to maintain its position in the centre of the TV industry. So in 2022, Western European commissions accounted for 40% of all TV seasons announced in that year. And that's actually increased to represent 44% of all television announced so far this year. Comparatively, the losses in the US were so significant that they've actually lost 3% of their market share. Now, if we look a little bit closer at Western European commissions, it becomes increasingly clear that public broadcasters are still the jewel in the crown. So between 2022 and 2023, public broadcasters were the only commissioner type to sort of keep their commissions level over the same period. An interesting phenomenon, because a few years ago everybody was saying, do we still need public broadcasters? Is it an outdated model in the age of streaming? And I think that they did need a shift in operating towards more streaming models, but in this time of commissioning downturn, I think we're likely to be reminded of the distinct value of public broadcasters and indeed public funding in a time when the market is proving so volatile. However, whilst Western European commissions did fare better than their global counterparts, scripted announcements did still suffer more than unscripted titles. So this makes sense. Scripted titles are more expensive to make than unscripted titles. So with commissioners facing budget cuts across the board, you can see here that the volume of scripted titles announced in Western Europe between 2020. However, they have suffered less than US counterparts. So US scripted titles decreased over the same period by 35%. So it's quite a big difference. So it's not as bad news for Western Europe as it is for the US. There are also even further nuances if we look at the same data in terms of genre. So you can see that the more expensive genres, so sci-fi and fantasy and comedy, have been the most affected by the slowdown in commissioning, whilst unscripted titles like reality and entertainment have been less affected. However, although they're generally shorter and sometimes cheaper to make than adult content, children and family titles have also been significantly impacted. So you can see here in pink that over the period, the volume of children's commissions announced decreased by 14%. Again, the decrease is most evident amongst SVOD commissioners. They had a decrease here of 27%. And the slowdown, again, has had less impact with well-funded public broadcasters, because as markets like Australia and US are producing less new children's content, markets like the UK and France are going to be able to corner the acquisitions market, because there'll be less new content in the market to be acquired. Now, while children's commissioning as a whole is mainly suffering because of this oversaturation problem, the main reason that SVOD children's commissioning is declining is because of subscriber motivation. So at Ampere, we ask consumers about their motivations behind subscribing to a streaming service. So we ask them questions about price, content, viewing habits. Unfortunately, the question that the least number of respondents related to was one about % of streaming subscribers said that they signed up because the platform has stuff that their kids like to watch. So it means that at a time when subscriber growth is stalling, children's content is just not a priority for SVODs. Conversely, the top motivator was price. So we can already see streamers acting on this with the introduction of the ad-funded tier. Consumers are also driven by a desire for sports and for TV shows. So ultimately, that's where funding is going to be concentrated over the next few years. So SVOD commissioners have been the most affected by the slowdown in commissioning. Public broadcasters have proven more robust. However, linear commissioners have not been immune from the slowdown. Half of the top 10 linear commissioners also showed a decrease in their volume of children's commissions between 2022 and 2023. So far, it's been a bit of a bad news story, but it's not all bad news. I have been able to find some little areas of growth, some sort of glimmers of light in what else is a quite dark time. So it's still true that the market for commissions is more competitive than ever. So where are these little areas of growth? It's clear that public broadcasters still offer the most reliable and consistent opportunities for those looking to create children's content in Western Europe. The pie on the left shows commissioners that showed growth between 2022 and 2023. So you can see that of the commissioners that showed growth over that period, almost a third were public broadcasters. However, public broadcasters are not the fastest growing commissioner type of children's content. Rather, it was actually producers, which I've shown here in green. Although there's a much smaller number of commissions, they were the only commissioner type to offer more opportunities in 2024 than they have done in the previous 2 years. I think the main reason for this is just because it's so hard to get a commission. So really well-established production companies have just decided to fund their own content with the hopes of, as I said earlier, capitalising on an active children's acquisition market, which I will go into in a bit more detail later. It's also clear that titles based on existing ideas are faring better in the current market. And this makes sense. If you've got a smaller budget, you do want to spend your sort of limited money on something that's more likely to be successful rather than taking a risk on new content. So as a result, renewed titles, so those in their second or later season, were less impacted by the slowdown than new titles. So they decreased by just 4% compared to 22% for first run titles. Renewals also represent an increasing proportion of children and family commissions. So that means that if you are the producer of an existing show, your chances of renewal are better than they would have been a few years ago. And it also means it's much better than your chances of securing a commission for a new title. It also means that if you have a title that's previously been successful but wasn't renewed in a more competitive renewals market, it might be time to look for a new home for that title in terms of maybe the original commissioner going back to them or looking for a new commissioner elsewhere in favour of putting out new ideas which are less likely to succeed. In the same vein, we can also see that IP-based commissions sort of offer a safe bet for commissioners looking to safeguard their spending on ideas that have already proven popular. So if we look at children's adaptations, you can see here that the volume of titles announced actually increased by 4% between 2022 and 2023. And this was one of the only types of children's content that actually increased over this period. The same is true in terms of the proportion. So in terms of first-run titles, so that's where commissioners are taking the most risks. Titles based on IP represented an increasing proportion of first-run titles. So I've established some areas of growth, or at least consistency, for children's commissions. However, with commissions more difficult to secure than ever before, I also want to highlight the increase in independent production companies creating their own content. So my next section is going to explore a few alternative routes for success if you can't secure a commission. And also, I want to explain why that's such a good idea in the current market. So I established earlier that children are not a motivating factor when consumers decide to subscribe to an SVOD service. This has had a detrimental impact on the volume of children's commissions announced by streamers. However, Ampere's consumer data does show that subscribers that live in households with children are less likely to churn than consumers with no children. So while children's content isn't enticing people to sign up, it is stopping them leaving. So at a time when subscriber growth is stalling, subscriber retention is actually more important than ever. So this chart shows how likely people were to cancel a subscription within the next 6 months. Households with children are in pink and households without children are in blue. And you can see that across the board, households with children were less likely to churn. So as a result, while streamers are limiting their budget for new, original and even exclusive children's content, they are also acquiring large volumes of existing children's content to appease this very important consumer group. So this chart uses a combination of data. So it's got Ampere's cross-platform analytics service and then our commissioning data to compare how the volume of acquired content compares with changes in commissioning activity. So if we look at the top 5 commissioners of children's content in 2023, you can see that while Disney and Paramount commissioned a much lower volume of children's titles over that period, the number of titles on their platform for children grew considerably. So you can see that Paramount actually increased their catalogue of children's content by over 50%. So this means that if you can secure production funding, there is a market out there for companies buying children's content. And there are a few different options. The first one I want to talk about is free-to-view platforms. I think they represent an increasingly good opportunity for production companies. There has historically been stigma about, just YouTube content, and even seeing a lot of commissioners fighting to keep their content off YouTube. But I think we're starting to see a bit of a sea change. And certainly with series like Miss Rachel, reaching critical acclaim, global success, creators have proven the power of free-to-air platforms to promote and also monetize high-quality children's content. The most notable success is probably CoComelon, launched in 2006. Almost 20 years later, CoComelon is still making distribution deals globally. And its parent production company, Moonbug, has actually recreated this YouTube-first business model. Moonbug content was sold to 25 different streamers by the first quarter of 2024. Now, I also understand that saying just make CoComelon is limited in its usefulness, so I've got a smaller scale example that I wanted to share with you. This is the production and distribution timeline for an animated series called Lucas the Spider. It started out as a YouTube short. I think it was about 30 seconds long. The show was then acquired by a production company, Fresh TV, in 2018, and they started to work on a long-form show that they released in 2021. Then in Q2 2022, Amazon came on board, took on the title, and they helped accelerate its global appeal until the end of 2023, where the show then switched to Netflix. And at that point, the title had then reached 42 different markets. So it just shows that you can start with just a little 30-second clip and end up being, really quite massive. Another option, which I mentioned earlier, is to seek funding from production companies. So while their commissioning figures are smaller than broadcasters, studios or streamers, starting small can still lead to big success if you've got strong enough ideas. Again, this is a production and distribution pipeline for an animated version of Pinocchio and Friends. So this was actually commissioned in 2020 as a joint venture between two production companies, Rainbow and Toons Media. The title had already reached a second market within half a year of its release, and it was renewed for a second season in the same quarter. The title has since been distributed to 8 different markets, and it's been sold to streamers including Amazon Prime and HBO Max. So it proves that the demand for popular children's content is still high, just might not come in the form of a commission. So I have squeezed a lot of thoughts and data into the last 25 minutes. I will have an email up at the end as well if you do want a copy of this presentation or any of the data in it. I'm very happy to share it. But these are my sort of key takeaways. The first takeaway is that we are in a turbulent market. It does seem like bad news, but Western Europe is actually faring better than other markets, and that's mainly thanks to well-funded public broadcasters. The second is that titles based on existing ideas, so that's whether you've got a renewal, looking for a recommission with the original commissioner or elsewhere, or you've got an adaptation based on a book or other IP, they're more likely to succeed than new ideas. My third point is that while children don't hold the purse strings in terms of subscription, they do reduce churn, so streamers and studios are looking to acquire rather than commission content. And with this in mind, my final point is that if you can find other avenues to fund, produce and distribute high quality content, the potential for a hit is still high. So that's it for me. Thanks for coming and thanks for listening. If you'd like a copy of the presentation, please just drop me an email or speak to me after. I'm more happy to share. Thanks very much.
Hi everyone, how's it going? Right, who here has a fandom? You do not need to sing it, just raise your hand, signal in some way, shape or form. No fandoms? Okay. 15% of the audience. Well, hopefully a bit more maybe this evening. I'll explain why I asked that, but let me introduce myself first. So my name is Jelena. I am the strategy director at Kids Industries, looking after our research and strategy teams. More pertinently to our conversation today, I'm a fan of several of these things. Some of them really specifically, like that needs to be David Suchet as Poirot, not David Suchet, not Poirot, them together. Exactly, social fandom. If someone else is a fan, let's chat later. But I'm here to speak to you about the importance of fandom and social fandom. And even though only 15% of this room seems to have a fandom, it is important to the global child. Around 65% of them said that they are fans of something. I've presented these stats before, and I'm kind of torn whether that's a big number or a small number. And I kind of think it's small for children, but it's driven by different countries. So on the left we have Nigeria, which is like, yes, we're in, and France is saying, no, not for us, which kind of works. It's very French, isn't it? And in the UK is kind of more on the higher end. a lot of children do have a fandom. And we're obviously in an entertainment conference, and it's interesting for us to speak of, but I think it's also important to start with why. We at KI, I personally believe that fandom can be really rewarding. Whilst there can be negative things, and it can be a bit toxic or a bit extreme, for so many people, fandom is an enriching experience. It helps kids feel like they belong to something, helps them define who they are, helps them feel pride or be more creative with it. Sometimes the qualitative quote says it better, but this particular parent speaks of how they use Pokemon to motivate their child, who due to a disability may need a bit of extra empowerment. So it can be a positive experience. And I suppose from the brand's perspective, I don't hugely need to convince you, but fans want to consume across different platforms, and they will happily spend on products or engage across different touch points, advocate for you as well. So why KI and fandom? Why am I here speaking to you about it? So it's been something that Kids Industries has been working on for quite a long time. And this is the fandom model that a while ago we premiered at the CMC, actually. So that QR code gives you the insights to the model. I'm not going through all of it today, but I'll use some of the data from it and some of the original work for context, but mainly lean into this 2024 study that had us speaking to people aged 6 to 14 in UK, US, India, and South Korea. So a bit of agenda planned for the day. We'll go through the model. What's about the social nature of fandom? This session is about what's the benefit of sharing? Why do we do it? Can we enhance it? What are the problems with it? There has to be a problem. And what can we do to fix them, of course. So this is one of those slides that is great to give to people. So here it is. And hard to present because there's so many numbers. But the point I want to make is that fandom comes in all different shapes and sizes, and people are fans of different things. Some of the key changes here are animation declines, video games increase with age. Influencers surprised me a little bit because I thought that kind of tween age would be great for influencers, but actually they're going way younger, and I think that has something to do with the joy of connecting to that person and just hitting a little bit younger. Also, there are market differences, but several dynamics remain consistent, and that's what the model explores. So we look through the lens of interaction moments. You have to interact to have a fandom. There needs to be a touch point, a moment, preferably more than one. Looks through the lens of self-definition. I'd say it's the most important one, but it isn't. They are all important. You need all three. But self-definition is all about, what does this fandom mean to me? What's it changing for me? What's it driving for me? And then the one that's the focus of today, which is all about social amplification. Can you, should you, would you share this fandom? And actually, fandoms are social for the vast majority of people. Just by the definition, the official one, of fandom, it's a community or a subculture. It's something that is shared. Whilst there appears to be 7% of children who do not share a fandom with anyone in their lives, the vast majority of them are having a bit of a shared experience, be that with parents, with their friends, or with a broader community. And all fandoms benefit from being shared. And I think I joked on LinkedIn, like most things benefit from being shared. It makes it a lot more fun that you don't have to do everything on your own. And that kid's 5, so they can see the sense in it. And all these different social groups, friends, communities, family, actually have a different role to play in fandom. And some of this data actually surprised me as well, which was quite exciting. So we'll go through how they contribute and how they perhaps can be, I don't want to say used, amplified, supported. Families are key in discovery for Western markets. So this was asking for the fandom you do have, how did you first hear about it or how did you discover it? And actually in US and UK, you can see there's quite a significant chunk that came, found about it from my family. And then it really declines in India. And then South Korea is like, absolutely not. And self-discovery is actually a lot bigger in those countries. And at first we thought, okay, family actually plays a really big role in India and Korea, but it's a different role. It's not as much about media sharing. They're also a bit more, well, not a bit, a lot more social, a lot more digitally empowered fandom. So actually self-discovery plays big. But family is important for a lot of the markets. Family intros create more enduring fandoms. So those fandoms that were discovered via a family, 20% of them last more than 5 years. And that's a lot more than those discovered by yourself or with your friends. And why is that? Well, families have a way of embedding some rituals, some moments, and a certain commitment into a fandom. The commitment can come from the fact that you could get thrown out of the house if you do not support the fandom. I actually think that does factor into it, and that because parents own where we live and they are the ones funding the fandom, they kind of help create and power it on. But I also think it has something to do with what kind of fandoms we discover to different people in our lives. So this question looked at what have you discovered with these people. So families are most likely to introduce us to big franchises, a bit of Harry Potter, a bit of Star Wars, films and sports. All of these tend to be bigger opportunities, lots of touch points, multi-generational and more enduring. What we discover with friends is more likely to be gaming, live action, and wider interests. That's things like sharks and cats and dinosaurs, which is like every time we speak to kids about fandoms, you get ones that you identify and it's a brand, and then throw in some sharks and dinosaurs. That's what comes from friends. And actually, if you think about it, it makes sense, because those are the things you are more likely to deal with in the playground. Communities in between, there's a lot of personality-led stuff. And then yourself, you either discover influencers, which is very algorithmic, very I'm here on my device. And musicians are there as well, which is a lot more personal. Now, aside from being an interesting slide, I think this one is useful from the context of, we speak of word of mouth often. So it kind of tells you, depending on what kind of brand you are, who is your key word of mouth that might be the most helpful and what is the most natural sharing opportunity. So we introduced a bit more of friends and community as well, and said that they're useful for different things. Family actually scored pretty well across all of the measures. Friends were good on most of them, not the best at longevity. It's the movement of the playground that doesn't always support it as well. But community wasn't great at discovery and conversion. Community seems to be, and I have some stats about community, they're different. They're not where you go to find out about new things. There's almost a threshold to a community of, you need to already like it, and then we'll help you evolve it and we'll help you grow it. So very little discovery there. Friends are the natural transition from family in a way. They're your first, next social group. After your immediate households, they help shape who we are, what we like, the conversations we have. And if you share a fandom with friends, there are certain things that you're a lot more likely to do than in general. And interestingly, they're kind of social and they're kind of show-offy. So we have owning products and badging, which are about airing and transmitting to the people around you, this is who I am, this is what I love, this is what I stand for. And you'd think, I actually think wanting to know more, it's a little bit about information, but that as well is about badging and showing off. Because when you are in that age group of 6 to 14, knowledge about the brand you love is actually social currency, is about doing well in the playground. So all of them are related to those social spikes and engagement. And it would appear that communities are not just your online friends. Some communities do not speak at all unless they are speaking about what is their shared passion. And actually the activities that the community does together are different. They want to learn new skills, discuss, collaborate, create. I know we had some sessions earlier today about the power of creation and collaboration, a huge trend in children's content where there is a shared fandom and a community where they can do it. So markedly different. They were all offered the same options, but just ended up providing different data. Now, social fandom, hopefully, I've convinced you all, is important. It makes it more fun. It means we can share from a brand perspective. It means the brand can grow more. But it is being challenged. Now, we don't need to, for probably 63rd time in the last couple of days, say there's a lot of content and it's a really difficult ecosystem. But I do want to draw your attention to a couple of stats here. The first one is 40 million plus experiences on Roblox. That has been the official stat since about 2021. And that would mean, like, it's just grown so much since. Like, is that double? Who knows? I tried to see where's the refresher, and it said, oh, it's too complicated to count. It would take too long. And I'm thinking, why are we counting? They must know. But we don't know. That's the last one we've had. But between that, I think, Olivia, you just shared great information about the amount of video content, 3.2 paid-for streaming services in the home. Children just watching so much stuff. The UX and behaviors of how we watch, it's all about quantity, not even within multiple screen. That one there is sludge content, so that's all on the same screen, all of them moving, so you can really like test your eyes and your brain as you go through that. Overwhelming access and choice, and it does create this system where fandoms are just a little bit less likely to develop. And it feels like just a little bit now, but that could really, really grow. And you can see from that child, doesn't have a fandom, doesn't care, too many. It's hard for me to become dedicated. I'm not watching anything. This was one of the most shocking stats from our global study, where we had households where parents were stricter and moderated the children's content, and therefore there was a bit less of that scrolling around, doing whatever you like, and others where parents were not moderating. And the difference in that, like one simple question, does your child have a fandom, were vast. And those in stricter households, those which were not allowed to do whatever they like, were way more likely to have a fandom. I've seen it qualitatively as well, where kids were watching the same show on Netflix versus YouTube, and those on Netflix were a little bit more likely to fall in love with it. They were a little bit more focused on it, which kind of is a part of it as well. Another phenomenon we've seen, probably in the last year and a half, qualitative, it's hard to quantify this one, is kids just saying they're fans of themes and genres in UX. Like, what are you watching or what are you enjoying? And then they say things like, oh, well, like prank videos or videos of, it's a niche genre, videos of toka boka dramas where they're kind of little toka characters dramatized in like a really weird way. And I asked them, who makes this? And is there a brand? Is there a title? Is there a story? There isn't. Or if there is, they're not able to tell because they're just falling in love with a format, and then TikTok or Reels or YouTube Shorts feeds them more of the format, and it becomes harder to have like a more rewarding fandom, perhaps. Random Reels. So we get in a situation where friend A and friend B are watching completely different things, where sibling A and sibling B could be watching a different thing, and that parent that may well be present is also kind of watching and doing something else. And that does make it harder to have those shared moments. And the parent kind of explaining, it's hard to get us to do something together. Youngest one is watching Minecraft, this one's playing game. I like how they refer to that parent, this one. And we might be watching some of our episodes in here. Harry Potter is the one thing we watch the same. And that's a problem. The fact that we can't have these shared moments, the fact that I'm watching one thing, but someone else is binge watching Bridgerton, I'm on House of the Dragon now, it removes some of the water cooler conversations that we used to be able to have. And it removes that momentum of having a shared fandom. So the increased autonomy and media abundance can lead to less fandoms overall, fragmented, thematic, or shallow fandoms. So that's the ones for just like prank videos on TikTok, and can have less socialization overall. And it's incredibly important we do keep it. Fandoms are still there. This is not a presentation, and you've seen a majority of kids say they have a fandom of it's all going down the drain, terrible. Shared fandom moments are still common, but being so powerful, it's something to protect and adapt for. So the last section really deals with what have the audience told us and what have we observed in research and analysis of what can we do to create some of these shared moments and to protect the fandom that matters to them as it does to us. So we found 4 distinct trends, and I'll go through each of them in order. Reverse fandom socialization, media that meets in the middle, direct to communities, and facilitating play and collaboration. Who doesn't want to do that? So the reverse fandom socialization is really, really interesting. And it's all about the children bringing their parents on that journey rather than parents bringing their children to their fandom journey and introducing them. Parents are willing participants in this. 60% of them agree they don't spend enough time with their child. Lucky 40% that feel that they do. And they are willing, I think at one point this slide said they're willing to go to their child's level. Only 38% of parents and children share a fandom, but the vast majority share fandom moments. And that is parent-led. So the parent will watch what the child's watching so that they don't leave the room, will give it a go, give it a play, much more than the child will do it. The child will do it if it's cool, if it's interesting to them, but the parent will go for Bluey and will try and learn about Minecraft because they want to create that moment with their child. And we have two roles as grown-ups, don't we? We are parents and we're adults, but parent, it kind of supersedes the one of the adult. And even where parents have their strong fandom behaviors, could even be a football club they support, they will adapt and they will develop new ones for their kids. So we see parents who develop completely new fandoms, learn about Minecraft, give it a go, see what happens, and the ones that adjust their existing fandom. This parent of a 5-year-old boy here quite liked Lego as well, but now he's experiencing it in a different way and trying new ways to play it out with their child. So what can we do to create this kind of happy ecosystem that's both child up and parent down? There was research we did a few years ago that said in the toy world, it's incredibly difficult to create experiences that both parties equally enjoy, but they actually don't have to equally enjoy it. The child needs to really enjoy it, and the parent needs to enjoy seeing their child enjoy it. So what can we do as brands is acknowledge that we want parents as an ally, give them the materials to support. That particular example is from Pokemon. Honor their experiences with social media, with however we communicate with parents, honor their feelings, acknowledge them as also an audience for us. And we can create experiences that are designed to be shared. These days in particular, with how gaming is going and how much of the gaming is social inherently, we do have an opportunity to do that. So the next thing we'll do is we will try to meet in the middle. There's more and more opportunity to create stuff that's multi-generational, that people both love and share. The stats are not in here, but that particular fandom study asked people of all the different generations, what do you want most in the future from your fandom? And actually they all kind of responded the same thing. The execution will be different, and the 5-year-old can't read, and the 15-year-old doesn't want to read with the 5-year-old, but the emotions, the experiences were the same. Qualitatively, we spoke to fans of kind of a hobbyist war gaming opportunity, like brand, and I asked the older fans there, would you play with a child? And they said, well, if the child knows the rule, I'll play with a child. So we can create more and more media that does meet in the middle. Going forward, kids do want to still share with friends, share with family. These are some of the top future desires in terms of fandom. And I think the brands, at least in that sense, are responding and are creating content which plays at multiple levels. It may well have a key audience in one end of the spectrum, but actually it's quite fun to watch all around it. What is important to do, or what the audience has asked us to tell you all, is it does need to be created meaningfully. So not just a prequel and a sequel that feels like an add-on and is there. It needs to be a story that will offer something new and offer something fresh. This particular person was really into Cruella, less into Lightyear, but that will be a personal preference as well. But do not treat those prequel and sequels opportunities as irrelevant or random. Direct to community couldn't be more important in this day and age. So that's as part of a fandom wheel in and of itself. We called it Friend because brands which connect on a human level have way stronger fandoms. You could track back Taylor Swift's fame back to decades ago when she was touring in small towns, when she was speaking to her fans way more than anyone else. Same for BTS. These people are not untouchable. They are speaking, and they are reaping the success of it. Young children want to connect with personalities related to their fandom, and we have lots of opportunities to do that for them now. This creates a positive moment and a stronger sense of community. This child went to Crystal Palace and they met some players. But what I love about this, it was the best thing ever. But he's mentioning his dad. It's not just about it being the best thing ever because these players were there. It was a shared moment that was enabled by the brand. So what can we do? There are more and more platforms where this happens. This is not as mainstream in the West as it is more kind of in Korea, in China, but the brands, the companies, the musicians over there are way more actively speaking to their fans. And we can as brands acknowledge that they exist and they are important. One of my favorite examples will always be BTS, because they're one of the people that really, really championed it. That's a quote from one of the guys. BTS are as much fans of ARMY as ARMY are fans of BTS. We are inspired by them. They also each year do an initiation speech and do things around, if you are in Seoul, please know someone here cares about you. These fans will never meet BTS guys, but they feel connected, and that can nurture fandom. And then finally, giving them touch points that they can do together. Easier said than done. But the number one thing kids want is play, immersion, and these real experiences. I think Yolanda was speaking yesterday about how we have to believe there ought to be space in the world for live experiences and for shared moments. To be fair, these could be online as well, but for these, just a bit more than watching content and a bit more than scrolling, but something we can do together, we can play and have fun. They are not easy to execute, can be among the more expensive brand touchpoints, although they can be scaled down as well. So on the bottom, we have online versions. We have PokePost. Poke had a great campaign all about friendship and sharing. And one kind of question, call to action to the people in the children's media is where these are inaccessible or where these are impossible, expensive. We've not yet seen brands collaborate on them. We see brands collaborate on content, but way less so on bringing a physical experience together into the world. So in summary, fandoms are incredibly social, and each social group has a role to play, a different role to play actually, across a child's fandom journey. Parents help create, nurture enduring fandoms. Friends give you that fun and engagement, and the community is there for creativity and depth. Social fandoms lead to stronger emotional connections, lead to stronger fandoms. But the way in which we live this day, the way in which we consume content, is actually bringing that into a bit of a risk. So what can we do? Strong fandoms embrace community platforms. They embrace direct communications, play, and immersion. Parents are also a strong ally, and media that meets in the middle can have a great role to play. And thank you very much. And technology worked.
One of the panelists in another session referenced being a child in the 80s where you just, were friends with the kid down the street and you bonded over whatever. Versus nowadays, a child can connect with someone online over, a shared love of Minecraft. So did you notice a change with COVID where people were forced into a lot more online relationships versus just being around each other in person?
Yes, but it didn't change. It changed things, but not necessarily the fandom. So I think we found that online relationships were not always good for fandom, but often very good for fandom. Because otherwise, if the kid down the street doesn't like the thing, well, you're stuck. No one likes baseball in your street and there's no one else. So I think that's one of the nicer elements that online world gave us, is that you could find other people that liked it. COVID definitely accelerated it, pushed kids into those spaces, pushed those spaces to welcome people who they maybe didn't have all the regulations to look after. From the fandom perspective, we found that they then found their tribes there. Also, when we ask kids who do they speak to in Roblox, most of them do speak to kids they know in real life as well. So they kind of hang out in school, then they meet in Roblox after, just for extra.
Great, thank you.
Hi, really loved both of your speeches. It was really nice to hear. This question's more to Olivia. You talked about acquisitions being more important in terms of content purchases these days, and you broke it down really nicely. And I was wondering if you had looked into which type of IP people are acquiring more. Is it large volume IP? Is it existing franchises, as you said, existing franchises being very popular, or are people still taking risks on sort of smaller volume non-franchise IP when it comes to acquisitions?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just high volumes of everything. So I'd say both. But they are really getting the big titles as well. I don't have a chart on it, but my colleague made one. If you got in touch with, I will be able to provide for you. I can't remember off the top of my head what it said, but there were some high-profile titles in there that even streaming platforms had created with the intention of keeping them exclusive and original for themselves, but it was actually more beneficial for them to sell them across even other competitive streamers, and it's actually creating more revenue for them than actually keeping their children's content exclusive. So yeah, I'd say both.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question around the fact that you were talking about, like, as a producer, creating your own content. Obviously, for a lot of small producers, that's something that's quite a tricky thing to imagine. And I don't know whether you've got the answer to this, but I'm sure a lot of people will be thinking, like, well, how do we do that then? Like, where could we go? Are there places we could go for funds? Or, you know, it's probably not your area. But
I mean,
just in case.
I think my most interesting thing I sort of stumbled across, and I'll probably do a bit more research into it, was this idea of it being a much better renewals market. So I think if I were a producer, I'd maybe look at a title that had previously been cancelled in this more competitive market and maybe try and get that recommissioned either by its original commissioner or seeing if you can actually sell it elsewhere and maybe use your revenue from that to try and fund new content. I mean, to be honest, the examples that I have seen have been from sort of these very established companies who, I guess, got that revenue there to say, right, well, we can't get a commission, we'll just make it ourselves. But I guess with Lucas the Spider as well, that was very, very short when it started. I think it was literally like 30 seconds long, but it was so popular that yeah, they were able to secure funding to make it longer, I suppose. So I guess that would be what I would say if you haven't got that much revenue to start off with, is just start really small. Yeah.
My question is, what is fandom? And what are the best examples for fandom?
Well, the official definition there was kind of, it's a subculture or a group united by a shared interest, a shared strong interest, which kind of covers most of the facets of it. I think what we'd say is it needs to feel meaningful to you personally. If you just like something but you don't feel like it's important to you, not very much fandom. A little bit enduring, so if they throw out a bad album or lose a game, you still love them. And a bit of advocacy as well. You're willing to tell people about it. Kids define it in all kinds of ways. They will say it's when you really love someone or something, when you really care about it, but those are kind of some of the fundamental elements there. There are so many powerful examples, and actually sometimes the smaller, like the most strong fandoms right now, probably is Taylor Swift and what she's doing, and the way that people are traveling to 5 different cities, spending money they don't have to do it. I've seen people say online, well, now that she has a boyfriend, I don't care if I do because she's happy. Peak fandom emotion. But I think, like with children as well, we're seeing very strong fandoms in sport for people more than for clubs. Although in the UK we do see clubs as well. We see strong fandoms with some enduring brands like Harry Potter still stays strong, Pokemon is really strong. But then we are also getting, like you'll see fantastically strong fandoms around like warrior cats, or you'll see fantastically strong fandoms around anime brands. I think kind of anime provides a lot more opportunity to follow up on your fandom. There are a lot more, whatever we think we're doing that's good at being immersive, we're failing compared to them. So anything can be a fandom, but these brands are doing good things to encourage it as well.
So what stage do you instigate fandom on a product?
Any. So we've worked with clients where it's at the complete nascency, or there needs to be an idea, but we worked with projects at commissioning, like early stages of commissioning, before they've made content, to discuss what else might be needed to be in that content brief. So almost the case of let's just make episodes wasn't quite enough. So exploring what are the opportunities for this fandom, therefore shall we be making YouTube live action competitions, or do we need to create extra stuff? So it's really interesting in that point. And then we've also worked with really mature brands that have been around for like 100 years to see how they can grow and expand it. So really at any. I think what I'd say is it is useful at any. what I would advise our clients, friends, colleagues is like to have a look. We always say it's something you can also try yourself because the dimensions, each one will mean something to you. Have a look, compare to your competitors. It comes as a research methodology as well, but that would at least give you that first understanding of where are the gaps that you may want to fill.
Hi, thank you both for your talks. They were fantastic. A question about fandom again. I was just curious about books and literature within fandom and whether in your research you've come across a fandom related to a particular author, or is it a particular genre, or is it a particular book? What are you kind of seeing as a trend among young people in terms of what they particularly attach themselves to?
Good question. More genre and book than author, unfortunately. It is, I think, it is unfortunate, but it also, I don't know if that's hugely unexpected. So we're seeing books, I was kind of thinking like Isadora Moon, but even, what's that one called? Like Slay in Your Lane, and kind of books that from young adults that they feel really connect to them. So seeing good, like strong book fandoms. Definitely seeing genre fandoms as well, but genre fandoms mainly in the fantasy realm. I feel like the other genres are a little bit too dispersed to really deliver it. And then authors, I don't think I've heard an author mention. Parents may mention, and kind of, we definitely hear Julia Donaldson mentioned from that perspective, but with the children themselves, more genre and more books.
And one final question?
Working on author PR, the next thing on the to-do list.
Hi, thanks for your talks earlier. What fandoms do you think are on the cusp of blowing up? So quite small at the moment, and then, because I feel like Bluey came out of the blue. So I'm just trying to think of other things like that, really.
Oh, I like it. It's almost like which ones. I think not small, but I think it has room to grow. Gabby's Dollhouse. Big fan of Ida the Vet. I think it has loads of little elements that could work. Unicorn Academy. It's got horses. Well, not their horses, unicorns, and they're all quite feminine. So I'm trying to think of a like another genre. I think those ones. And musicians. We had a conversation recently with people around doing musicians. Is there still fandom? There is. So I can't name any of them because they're way too cool for me. But the discovery method for TikTok and musicians and young people, I think, is working very well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again. It's been